Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counter Living Show number 144 for October 9th, 2023. I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight. Our topic is unplayable war games, and we'll talk about what we mean by that along shortly. In the meantime, we are clipping the newly arrived Valley of Tears from Multiband Publishing designer Carl Fung, series designer Dean Essig. It looks great. I should finish clipping it, barring the markers, which I may or may not clip because I don't think I need them, tonight during the show, actually. And we are drinking Laphroaig 10-year, the standard expression of Laphroaig, which is a fantastic selection. If I do say so myself, it's one of my favorites. It is bottled at 43%, and if you don't like peaty scotch, stay far, far away from it because it is a peat bomb. So, I will remind everyone to thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair. There's a link to the Patreon in the video description, as well as to a bunch of other things. I will also call your attention to the Mark Ruggiero fundraiser GoFundMe that is also linked in the video description. So please do check that out and do what you can. In that department, Mark and his wife will appreciate it, I am sure. So, before we get started with anything, I would like to say hello to Achilles, Alistair Logie, Andrew Atkin, Bill Simoni, Brian Gash, Chad Canetti, Dana Shadell, Daniel Silverthorne, Eric Hansen, FS Mora, Garrison Venn, HUN44644, New Eon Ticky. I think we're pronouncing that, sort of pronouncing it. I don't know. The legend himself, Fucko, is here. Jason Williams, Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Okabayashi, Joe Perez, John Mogg, John Stanley, John Clark, Kent Shern, Lee Grant, Marty Sample is here, Matt Davidson, Meandering Mike, Mo Romaniuk, Perry Spiropoulos, Philip Musket, Pizza Frenzy Man, Randy Maudlin, Ray Garby, Ray Musselman, Rollo, Baker, Stacking Limit is in the house, Stigler is in the house, Thomas Bandy, Todd Cox, Tony from Tony's Board Life, Vicky, welcome back to the show, and William Bird. So welcome. I apologize in case I missed some folks, and I'm sure that I did. So we do have a little bit of like channel stuff, not too much. I will just mention that we continued our meandering through PQ17 this past week, and it is starting to become comprehensible to me. So that is great. We probably have another 2 weeks at that, and then we will skip over to Napoleon's Last Gamble. Now, speaking of Napoleon's Last Gamble, we actually have relevant news here this week. So let's look at the pre-order for Napoleon's End. This is from OSG, designer Kevin Zucker. This is the 1814 campaign in France. It is the final of 3 volumes covering this campaign at the Grand Tactical level. I don't even see what the price is on this page, to be completely honest, but this is the pre-order price. It is a pay up front pre-order. I would expect this to arrive sometime around the end of Q1 in 2024. That is typically how they have managed to do it. And I'm very happy with the job that they're doing on these games. So what is the price here? What is the pre-order price? Like $80, something like that? I don't know. $98. So if you're into this series, the clock is ticking. I actually haven't ordered it yet myself, and I'm not going to until after Compass Expo in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it should be Napoleon's End Part 1, shouldn't it? Napoleon's First End, Napoleon's Second End is what we're going to be playing in a couple of weeks. So the piece of news number 2 is the new and not pre-order but on release sale from Multiman. This is ASL Action Pack number 18 for Oktoberfest 37. Now, I have cut back on the ordering of Advanced Squad Leader products because I play almost no Advanced Squad Leader. I will pick up the new Doom Battalions when that comes out, and because I only have the old Avalon Hill version of that. And I will pick up this because some of the scenarios in here, at least some of the scenario work, we'll see how it we'll see what this actually breaks down into, and I'll do an unsleeving video of this. Some of the scenario work here was done by the late Bill Sisler, who was a friend of mine. So I did not feel that I could not get this. So Bill was a scenario workhorse, did a lot of scenarios for ASL over the years, and he passed pretty suddenly. And I think it was 2001, but or 2021, but I think it might have been 2022. I'm not 100% on that. So we've got this on order, and it is 2 boards and 14 scenarios that are all over the place. So there'll be plenty to do out of this action pack. And let's face it, you could always use more scenarios, and it's $27, which is pretty good, I think, for for what you're getting in here. And now that I've seen the inside of Valley of Tears, it seems to make more sense that it's at the MSRP that it is, because it's 4 maps and 5 counter sheets. And you will see an unboxing of it this week that is actually already uploaded. I had trouble with the video of time commitment issues on a number of things of late, but I managed to get this done. But I had to shit. Did I screw that up? I think I did. There we go. All right. The chat overlay should be back up now, starting with the new chat. Sorry about that. That was my fault. I closed the window instead of clicking through it, which is not what you're supposed to do. So, yeah, I will be picking that up. So once again, thanks everybody for coming. I'm not sure what we're gonna do next. We've got another voice at the table now, so that's gonna change the dynamic of what we had planned on. So we didn't have a plan after Napoleon's Last Gamble, which I think is probably going to take us about 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. Probably take us about through the end of the year, and then we'll pick up something new in early 2024. I have no idea what that's going to be. Roy McGaw, Andrew Atkin, Ronald Nicholson, welcome back to the show. Downfall, I think, is pretty much coming, isn't it? I think some people have already gotten it, but maybe that's Kai and John Butterfield. So I don't know. I saw pictures of the innards of it. Let me put it that way, but I forget. I forget who posted those. So I was pretty early on the list of people to get Valley of Tears, but unfortunately, the post office decided it was going to get kicked around between multiple post offices locally for a couple of days, which is unfortunate, but not the end of the world. As long as it was like to me on time to get to the Thursday unboxing slot, I guess I'm okay with it, right? But yeah, this looks really interesting, actually. So, and I'm not going to comment in any sense on the current situation over there. I think the timing is a little uncanny. But me talking about it would be like Bono talking about it. I would be totally uninformed on it, and you shouldn't take any of my opinions with any seriousness at all. So they may have some kind of special malarkey to get stuff to the Australians in like a big batch job or something like that. So Compass's sale, I believe, has already started or is about to start. So for those who are going to Compass Expo, you might want to just wait till Compass Expo unless there's something on very low stock, because everything will be on sale at Compass Expo. So there's that. All right, so let's have a sip of this. It's excellent. And there is no water in it. I do not need to put water in that. I don't need to put water in that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't put water in that. Yes. So this is actually news as well. And I guess I'll mention this very briefly because I have never pre-ordered anything from Decision Games before. So their process is that you put it in as a pre-order, you pledge on the Decision Games website, and they don't charge you at the time of they don't charge you at the time of ordering. They charge you at or around the time of shipping. Now, they also email you before they're ready to ship and ask for a confirmation that you still want the order and ask you to provide some information. And I hadn't seen that before. So first time seeing that. So just be aware that got caught in my spam filter. So it might get caught in yours too. So you might want to check that if you have the Axis Empires Ultimate Edition on pre-order. So Lee Grant, thanks very much. I have not ordered Great Battles of Alexander Deluxe, but I did order the new printing of Tyrant for its thicker counters. So in the same general timetable, I haven't seen that anybody has gotten it, and I usually am reasonably up on that because somebody, at least for this GMT stuff, because somebody will post it on Facebook or Twitter or something like that. And I haven't seen anybody turn that out yet. So Bill Simone says it takes 3 or 4 weeks for GMT to complete shipping anymore. That sounds right to me. Stacking limit, you will be missed at Compass Expo. And yes, the Compass catalog, the physical mailer has been seen in the wild. This is absolutely right as well. Um, so, stacking limit, you have our best wishes for a speedy recovery. So play war games. War games promote good health. Anyway, Manders has not gotten a shipping notice on Alexander yet, and I haven't gotten one for Tyrant, but I'm last on the list every time. Um, so anyway, I'm not in a hurry for it. I actually have Tyrant. I'm buying it as a just to get the thicker counters. So I was able to get a copy of Tyrant for a very reasonable price, even though it was going for, I think, a dumb amount of money. On the secondary market, I got mine from Enterprise Games. So Australia will be getting theirs tomorrow. Like I said, they oh, that's this weekend. Okay. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I would assume that creates some kind of delay. So once again, the Australians will be getting it soon. I mean, I don't mind surrendering that priority to the Australians, considering they get boned on all of the prices, right? So, this is true. This is good forward thinking on Stigler's part. So, I before we get to the topic, I'm going to mention one other thing. So, despite the fancy 3D printed counter trays that I've been organizing a lot of games into of late, all of my BCS games are organized into GMT trays, and I'm continuing to do that with Valley of Tears. However, there is the new innovation, which not really innovation, but the new thing that I have shown off on the stream are the GMT tray dividers. Now, paper versions of these have been in circulation for quite some time. I like these a lot better because I don't have to fuck with the paper. And this has been, organizationally, it's been a huge boon for this game. But just in terms of like counter sorting, it's revelatory to have these things. So I am planning on, as soon as I change the printer back over, to print about 30 more of each of them. They will be on the file repository, available to patrons at the swordsman level and above later this week, actually. And I've got two of you. I don't have a blank of the. So there's a 3-compartment divider and a 2-compartment divider. There is actually a 6-compartment divider, but I think it's dumb. I'll release it anyway, just in case somebody wants to use it, but it's dumb. Don't use it. But the 2s and the 3s are just incredibly fantastic. This did take they print very quickly, but it took a surprising amount of prototyping to get it to turn out just right, so that it has exactly the right height and your counters won't float between compartments and all that stuff. So GMT does, I think, ship international orders first. And like I said, they may ship like all of the Australian orders in one big batch. So that wouldn't be a huge surprise. Now, why they do that, I don't know, but they do, and whatever. I mean, like I said, it's probably one big batch. So if that's the case, it's probably better to get it out of the way. Anyway, scotch. Need scotch. Oh, this sucks. So I've been actually having a bit of trouble with bed adhesion for the last couple of print runs, and I went through multiple cycles of bed leveling to try to correct for it, and I think I have it, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm running repeated batches of these parts trays. These are not my models. These are available on Thingiverse. I forget what they're called, but they're just like little stackable parts trays. And there's a couple different versions, but I like the one with the scoop, because if you're pouring the counters back into a bag, you can just go dump them in. They work really well. And I've got like 40 of them for my personal use. So anybody at Winterfest, until I run out, will probably be getting a set of 4. So I have started to run those on some filament that I'm trying to finish up. So anyway, yeah, Alistair Logie, I absolutely sympathize with this. We had a sudden dog surgery need as well, like a year or two ago, and it was like $3,000. It was like, ugh. I am not really excited about this, in part because it's hypothetical, and I'm just not that interested necessarily in hypothetical stuff. I'd be more welcoming if it was a historical situation that included the hypothetical thing that I'm completely comfortable with. Um, Perfidious Albion, we have already discussed ASL Action Pack number 18. Remember this? There we go. So, yes, it is now available at a pre order price, and it will be available at a pre order price for about another 25 days or so. You will save $9 by getting it at the pre order price. So, I have one, I just haven't installed it. I am using glue stick, so and it would be nice to not have to deal with that. So I maybe I should think about doing that. It's finally biting the bullet and putting the magnetic print thing on. So anyway, unplayable war games. Now there's two different angles that we can define unplayable as. Now we can first of all say, and I think if we just say such and such a game is unplayable, I think the casual listener will assume that this first of the two types of unplayable is what we mean. And what the first one means is it's unplayable, right? It literally cannot be played. Now, this is true of a shockingly small number of games. What we more often mean, but do not say, is that it is unplayable for us. Now, I tend not to use that particular language when I'm talking about these games. I might say something like, that game's just too much, or that is not of interest to me, or I don't prefer that style of game, depending on the details of why it's unplayable for me. And I'm not talking about, stuff I just don't like, I'm not into, like Sea Lion Deluxe, for example, which will probably be a nice package on Decision's part. Somebody, I forget who it was, Joe Perez, this might be your fault, or it might be Mark Herman's fault, I'm not sure, recommended USN highly enough that it is now on my wish list. So thanks very much for spending my unearned the money that I do not have for a future purchase of USN. So it actually looks fairly interesting. And I almost bought a copy of Wolfpack the other day. I've got about four S&T magazines with games, mostly unpunched, on their way. Those ought to show up. Uh, I doubt it'll be here by the end of the week, but we'll see. That'd be nice, but I don't care too much. And I got a couple other feelers out. So for another SPI thing. So mm, 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 mm. So Randy, I've been saying that for like 2 years, and I don't think you've mentioned this before. I have absolutely said Maudlin the in every single time. So it's Malden. Malden. I might even remember that, but not likely. So feel free to correct me again if I continue to get it wrong. So if we mean that a game is I'm going to get to this because this is a part of the point. Um, Anyway, so if we mean, oh, I didn't know this was available. I gotta do this and take a look at it. The graphics on that new edition are, wow, what a step up from the previous edition, which was fine. But the new edition is definitely a big step up in terms of graphical presentation. Anyway, so when we say that a game is unplayable, we might mean one of different things. And then we're going to talk the rest of the time about games that are unplayable for us. Um, However, if somebody has a game that they think is genuinely just flatly unplayable, I'd like to hear about it, because even the most famously egregious examples in our hobby, I think, are not truly, totally, like absolutely unplayable. Um, so we might decide that a game is unplayable um, because it's too big. Okay, that's an obvious thing. Not everybody has the ability to set up a huge game, although there is Vassal nowadays. So in some sense, one is making a choice that it's too big to deal with, rather than an absolute limitation on your actual available physical space. But that's fine too. You might decide that it is unplayable because it's going to take too long. So, footprint in time as opposed to footprint in table space, as I like to say. And we might say that it is unplayable due to complexity, um, or due to what I'm going to, I guess, call opacity, because, if we have a game that's just legitimately just such a huge mess that it's unplayable, I tend not to look at games like that, because even a game that I think would be very close to that, to matching that standard of this is just such a huge mess that I do not wish to deal with it, is the first edition of Vakht Rhine from Decision. Okay, this is sort of proto Goss, as it were. It's Goss, but it wasn't officially Goss yet, as I recall, and the rules were somewhat different. And holy cow, is that a terrible rule? Um, and yet I know people that played that. I think they played it badly, and I think they had a bad experience. In part because they got some stuff wrong, but I don't think that was their fault. That rulebook is a disaster. So that's about as close as I think you can get to unplayable due to it just is too big of a mess. Even so, I think it possible to put the work into it and fix it. This would be Stigler's classic example of SPI's Highway to the Reich. After having gone through his criticisms of them, of that game, I think he's right about all that stuff from what I've seen. I also think all that stuff is in principle fixable, but you'd have to essentially redevelop the game, right? Not redesign so much, but redevelop the game to make that thing work as written, or not even as written, because you'd kind of be rewriting it, right, in the process of that. And as John Stanley mentions, yes, Vassal can make things playable that otherwise would not be, due to size or due to time, right? I can, if I want a solitaire, another classic example of a game that's frequently cited as being unplayable is Case Blue. And I can totally I could have that set up in Vassal in like half an hour. And I only say half an hour because there is some discretionary setup where certain units set up within some hex radius of a specific hex. So you do have to do a little work to complete the setup in the Vassal module. But other than that, that's not particularly difficult, and I don't think that would take me very long at all. I could set that up tomorrow and just play it in odd hours, and hell, that's not a bad idea. I think that would be fun. That said, I think I do want to get into something Vassal, but that's coming soon, and I'll be ready to make that announcement. Not that it's a big secret; it's going to be TCS. But I'll be ready to talk in more detail about that once it's a little bit firmer, which might actually get firmed up this week. Jason Williams says the only game he's ever bought that was considered unplayable was S&T 122 Pegasus Bridge. I have no expertise with that particular thing at all. This is, yeah, absolutely. You got to impress your friends with the sheer anality of it, right? War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. I know I've got that, and it was one of those things where, man, this is too much. The entire Pacific War with daily turns. Nah, I'm not doing that. It looks fascinating, but I can't even watch like other people playing it on video because the pace is just so glacial. So I decided absolutely not on that one, even though I spent some money on it. I bought it on sale, in fairness. So on the computer side, I mean, maybe big scenarios out of Operational Art of War, or some of the huge games out of John Tiller might qualify for that as well. Like that, there's a West Front game that I think has daily turns. It's got like 200 turns. It's absolutely bananas. Joe Perez clarifies that USN was recommended by Mark Herman. It was Joe's second SPI game. Loved it and have the newer Decision Edition. So, Joe, let me ask you, how is the newer Decision Edition? Because it might be a little easier to get. If it is a good replication of the original game, I would consider it. And certainly it's going to be a graphical upgrade, even if not, even if it's got center nibs on the counters, which I think it does. Stigler, of course, points out Desert Fox Deluxe. That's not unplayable. That's just a mess. I mean, if one wants to decide I don't want to deal with this mess, then that's a completely fair and rational decision, to be honest. Maybe this is true too. I hadn't thought of it from this standpoint, but this is kind of fair, right? And the same thing might apply to Case Blue. Maybe this is unplayable, even though we, in principle, like to play it, but we're not going to because I think you can get this for less than 600, but less than 300, I think you're going to have trouble. Case Blue's hard to find for less than 600, and that's a no price as far as I'm concerned. And this makes me want to hang on to my extra copy of Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2, but then again, I have 2 or 3 extra copies of Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2. So I will be bringing some stuff to Compass Expo to sell. I think that's just the easiest route for me to do that. I do have some duplicates and some other things like copies of the Urals and GB2 and the extra Operation Mercury and that kind of stuff. So Invasions from Wisdom Owl. Now this got a lot of push when it came out. But actual people who actually played it seems to have not been great. A lot of people had a very frustrating experience with this thing that otherwise looks kind of neat. It does kind of look a bit like Empires of the Middle Ages, which is what made me take a look at it in the first place. And I'm glad I didn't spend the money on it. So Penny Rafesky, I think maybe the first person to mention the dreaded example of Campaign for North Africa. I'm not positive that. So for one thing, I am reasonably sure that Mr. Berg did not actually playtest this game to have come to the conclusion that it would take 1,500 hours to play. Now, I'm not saying that's dramatically off. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But and I'm not saying you necessarily have to play it to the very end to necessarily have an idea of how long that's going to take. Maybe it is 1,500 hours. I don't know. So if we played 3 hours a week for 50 weeks, it would take us like 10 years to do. I'm not sure I'm buying that. I'm not sure I'm buying that it will take quite that long. Maybe in terms of man hours, that's possible. And I think he recommended teams of 5 or 10 on each side too, which sounds absolutely silly. Nevertheless, I think Campaign for North Africa is far more playable today than it was back in 1980 or whatever that was when it came. I think it was 1980 when it came out. Because we have things like spreadsheets now, right? Those are enormously beneficial to playing big games with lots of paperwork, and it's got lots of paperwork. I'd like to try it, but I'm not going to go spend $500-600 on it either. And that's another one where can you get it for less than $400? Yeah, but you might be waiting a while, and what you might get is a box that somebody has pooped in. So this is touching on a topic that I didn't really want to deal with tonight, and maybe touches on something that's been getting talked about on Twitter a little bit. Some European academic said that putting history in games is, and I believe the exact term he used was absurd, which is exactly the term I would use to describe his position, to be honest. So and clearly that person is, and this is a designer, this isn't just some rando. Clearly that person is coming from a point of view of Euros, where you are just tacking the theme on at the end anyway. And in that case, maybe there isn't any point in actually trying to illustrate history with the game. Stacky Limit mentions Won by the Sword by Ben Hull. And I think this was one of those it's just a mess situations, and they did do an update kit that fixed it, from what I'm told. And I hear that if you have the update materials, it's actually pretty good and interesting. Stigler, are we talking here about Desert Fox Deluxe or Campaign for North Africa? Because I'm not sure I've heard a full playthrough of Desert Fox Deluxe either. At some point, I'd like to get to that, but it seems unlikely that it's going to happen anytime soon. Lord knows I've got enough North Africa games, for Pete's sake, around here already. Well, see, I have a monitor that's 4 feet wide, something like that. I have a Ultra HD wraparound monitor, and if you have a really big and good resolution monitor, like a 2K or 4K monitor, then that really makes a big difference for Vassal. But I will also say that sort of limited view that you get is something you get used to. You can zoom out. I mean, you can't not zoom out. That's easier to do now. Edelweiss. Roy McGaw says Edelweiss. Now, I hope this is not unplayable because I bought it. And actually, I got that from Noble Knight, and I had some issues with the copy that they sent me, and they were happy to fix it for me. So I will say that there is a reason why I'm a little cautious these days about buying war games from Noble Knight. It is not that I have had a bad experience with them. It is that they tend not to list the one critical word that we need as war gamers in the description of the thing that they're selling. And that word is unpunched or punched, right? I want to know if it's punched or unpunched. You'll get a condition like VG or EX plus or whatever, and that's nice, but that doesn't tell me whether it's punched or not. And I need to know that, right? I don't demand it be unpunched, but I want it to be complete if it is punched, right? I care less. The only reason I prefer to buy unpunched games when I buy games is because then I don't have to worry about it. Then I can say, five counter sheets. Yep, we're good to go. Have a nice day. I don't have to deal with sitting here counting 2,000 counters. Marty, I think a lot of people had this reaction actually. That rule book is a turd. It is an absolutely terrible rule book. The current rule book is a lot better, but it's also, it doesn't help that it's a really quite complicated game too. So there is a complexity barrier there in addition to this is a big mess. Okay. But again, I know people that played it. I think they played it wrong, but I know people that played it. They had a terrible time and hated it, and I think that's why. But certainly, they can't have found that rule book not frustrating to have to work their way through. So this does depend on the vassal module and the execution, but yeah, you can potentially get extra fog of war. Well, so I will say that this is something that got upgraded in a relatively recent, as in like the last 2 years or so, Vassal update, where the standard control mouse wheel zoom works in Vassal now. It did not some years ago. So, and John Sakalaris mentions the campaign game version of Empires in Arms, but I also know people who have played this and who are huge fans of it. So again, we may decide that that's unplayable, but it is not an absolutely unplayable thing. William Aarons, thanks for stopping by from Liverpool, North Syracuse, New York. Graffiti's Albion says, what is really cool with some war games designs is that traditional maps are really optional. The old SPF plot to assassinate Hitler is one such example. That is actually one of the S&Ts that's coming. I do actually have it already, but it is missing a couple of pieces. So this will alleviate any need to deal with that, and I can box it up. And also doesn't have the magazine. This new one that's coming will have the magazine. So there's that, and that's a fascinating game with an untraditional map. Let's say. Eric Hansen has played Highway to the Reich as a teenager. Everything Stigler said was spot on. I think Stigler's right about everything he said. Don't get me wrong. I will, I guess, mount the. So I think the whatever it's called, the disorganized status. I think that's probably that's a core issue. That's very central to the way the game's going to be experienced. That needs to get fixed because that's clearly busted. The thing with the open drop for the allies, that's going to break any market garden game. So I would never recommend even trying that in a market garden game, unless the market garden game has been specifically built to accommodate it, and that wasn't. Clash of Sovereigns: The War of the Austrian Succession. This is pretty recent, actually, from GMT. I think this came out last year or early this year, actually. And I've heard that this is a tough nut to try to get through. I did not pick this up, even though I am interested in the topic and am in principle in the market for a game on this topic. But I do have at least one game on this topic, and I think I might have another one coming, or at least on the wish list. And that's just the old S&T War of the Austrian Succession game. I'd kind of rather have that. Crown of Roses. I think there's a terrific game in Crown of Roses. I also think the rule book is way more difficult than it needs to be. Um, Sometimes they do say unpunched, but they don't always. And I generally look for their stuff on eBay, and then if I'm going to buy it, I go over to their site and buy it. I have done way too many things where I had to zoom in and zoom out for this to bother me. So I do think that this term, get like the term broken, and I think Stigler will agree with this because he said as much in his takedown of Highway to the Reich. I think the term broken is similarly overused. I think relatively few games are broken, but that percentage is definitely higher than the number of games that are truly unplayable. And a lot of times, if they're broken, they are fixable, but that assumes you're comfortable having bought a kit of an unfinished game that you then will do development work on to fix. And I will completely understand if you do not wish to deal with that, right? Well, this is unplayable because it's not out. Um, Although a lot of the pieces parts of it are out, the whole game's not out, and bluntly, it is my opinion that in redoing the maps, particularly so early in the process, and adding all of that terrain, they ruined the game. They added way more terrain, way more defensible terrain to the maps, making it basically impossible for the Germans to make headway without completely retooling the game, which they of course can't do. They don't have the flexibility to do that. I almost said they don't have the imagination to do that. But they're so that the folks that have been working on Europa for all this time are like it feels so constrained into just the way this is the Europa way of doing things. Propitious Albion asks about if Clash of Sovereigns was more errata or of a roughly as the earlier Clash of Monarchs. And I guess he didn't like the map from Clash of Monarchs. I don't know in Clash of Monarchs either, so I can't really comment on that either. Pacific War. This is another great example, actually. The full strategic scenario. Well, there's multiple strategic scenarios, but any of the strategic scenarios, I will agree with close to unplayable. Not unplayable, but I think a lot of people will very reasonably come to the conclusion that they do not wish to deal with that strategic scenario. Fortunately, there is ample play value in the campaign scenarios, including short campaign scenarios you could play in a few hours, to long campaign scenarios that will take you a couple of months to play out without necessarily having to deal with the strategic scenario. So caveat on that, but I mean, I think realistically that very few people will try to play that strategic scenario. I wouldn't feel comfortable even trying it unless I had already felt like I had mastered the entire rest of the game. So so I don't think GBACW is all that difficult to learn from the rules. Certainly, earlier versions of the GBACW rules, and I'm talking the GMT ones here, did have rule books that were not as clear as I would have liked. And ASL, I mean, how do you learn it? I suppose is an important, even critical question. Because if you've got like local ASL people to teach you ASL, then learning ASL is no problem. Despite the fact that the rulebook is a million pages. It is harder to find locals that happen to be comfortable enough teaching World at War. And that is a rule book that is very difficult. I won't say impossible, but very difficult to learn the game from. There are some online resources for helping with that, but I mean, I don't blame you for this at all. I have Steel Wolves. It looks neat. This is another one that might just be that the campaign game is really too long. So there's that. So PQ-17 is unplayable. I will go so far as to say PQ-17 is, in my opinion, unplayable solitaire. I think you will be missing so much of the experience playing at solitaire that I think you're better served playing anything else. And there are a few other games on this topic, including North Cape that I think Mo just did a video on in the last week or so. Le Grand Guerre. So this would be one of those where it's unplayable because you can't get it. There is actually a copy on the Facebook Marketplace not too long ago that sold, like in the last week or so, that actually sold for I think 250 or 350 or something like that, which is not a bad price for Le Grand Guerre. That looks neat, but it also looks graphically kind of ghastly. And I don't really want to deal with the weird Azure Wish box, and for a bunch of other superficial reasons, I don't want to pay $300 for it either. So I will, I will, I don't know that it's unplayable, but I will say unless a copy literally falls out of the sky like a meteor, I'm probably never going to play or own that. Pizza Frenzy Man has played War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. That's the computer game twice, start to finish. And you could do that. And you could certainly play a day or two and then put it down and come back in a few days or whatever. You could totally do that. That is an advantage to many, but not all computer games. We're gonna have to. I think we're gonna finish. Yeah, we'll do these first. All right. PQ17. So I'm finding it reasonably confusing. Oh, so this would be the Hobby Japan version. Am I getting that right, Brian Gash? Maybe. That's unfortunate, but I'm pretty sure you can get an electronic copy of the rule book, at least. But I mean, if anybody's in the market for this nowadays, I'm going to tell them to buy the one from GMT. I don't know if it's out of print yet, but it's if it's not, it's going to be fairly soon. Graffiti's Albion. So if you are really that curious about La Grande Guerre, there is a vassal module for it, and I believe the rules and all the other materials are available on Consim World if you're willing to dig around and find them. So you can look at these, but I think there may have been translation issues here as well. So I mean, I think this is totally a real phenomenon, right? There's like the Grand Guerre is actually a great example, right? It's on my wish list of things I'd like to get, but I mean, realistically, I'm not going to go out of my way to. I even have an eBay search set up for this thing, but unless unless I see it for an absolutely absurd price, in this case, I mean absurd low, I'm just not going to do it. So, I mean, it might be technically playable. But I'll never know because I'm never going to have it, right? So, for some reason, I do feel like Decision has historically had problems with scenario and campaign setup. Lord knows I struggled to the point of pulling hair out with the setup for Atlantic Wall. That eventually got fixed with both counter errata, which Decision is nice enough to send out for free, and with as in like the counters that weren't in the game that are listed in the setup are actually in the counter errata. And plus some actual fixes. And I'd say it's maybe 60 or 80 counters of counter errata for that game, by the way. I mean, it's a 3,600 counter game, so there's that. The percentage wise is not that high, but it's high. But then there's a lot of errors in the setup as well. So I had a lot of frustrations with that. Format scenario of Case Blue. Sounds about right. I mean, any OCS game is going to take a decent amount of time to set up. S&T Armada. Oops. This is a problem. Now, Armada is kind of a legendarily not great S&T game, actually. But it's interesting that they did actually put it out in the flat later on, as I recall. So clearly somebody liked it. What do I got coming? I got Plot to Assassinate Hitler. I've got Casino. I've got Berlin 85, and I've got Stonewall coming. All in the S&T magazine versions. So there should eventually be a new version of Killing Ground out. It's New England Simulation, so don't hold your breath till you turn blue in the face, because you'll be very, very blue in the face. I'm working my way slowly through the comments here, by the way. So if I've missed anybody, we will get to you. One by the Sword was unplayable out of the box. GMT had released an update kit that took 2 years. I think we covered this. I think you covered this, actually. Well, Hot Mess is one reason why a game might be unplayable. Um, yeah. This is a huge problem. You can fudge it, right? I mean, that's fine. If you decide you're comfortable with that, it's fine. Um, this is true, but so the I think the update kit that if you bought it from Decision actually had the counter updates in it. But there is like a whole bunch of other stuff. You will need to spend a significant amount of time kind of getting that put together, even if you bought the updated edition. And I just rebought the updated edition. I think there's a significant amount of game there. Andrew Adkin asks about playtesting campaign for North Africa. This is a Joe Perez question. I mean, I'm sure they didn't playtest the entire campaign. They admitted that they didn't playtest the entire campaign in War in the Pacific. They playtested the Guadalcanal scenario, which is, by the way, a one map scenario. It looks nice and compact. There's some really interesting things going on in War in the Pacific. Um, so this is probably true, actually. This was in development for a while, as I recall, but I mean, I don't know that. I mean, you could fudge this number, right? You could say, okay, we played 2 turns, and each of those turns took 10 hours each, and it's gonna how many turns in the campaign, blah blah blah, and extrapolate that number out. I just wouldn't. I just wouldn't have much faith in the credibility of that number. Um, yeah, and it was clear that while I won't go so far as to say that somebody writing for the show had played Campaign for North Africa, I doubt that very much. But clearly, somebody that writes for Big Bang Theory was in on the joke. If you watch that episode, I remember in the early 90s, I want to say, seeing the price on Second Front and being absolutely appalled by it and not buying it at the time, and then buying it like a year ago for 3.5 times that price. So, and I mean 4.5 times that price. So Carl says, "Oh, I've heard this from a number of people actually that say if once you put the fixes in, that one by the sword is really pretty neat." I have seen some reports of CNA. There's some people. Tom Stearns was playing it, as I'm recalling that maybe that wasn't Tom, but I think he was playing it with some other people on Vassal. So I think Campaign for North Africa certainly nowadays with modern technology, I think that's not playable, but not impossible to play. This could be true, yes. So Joe says that this was play tested in-house by the same 3 to 5 people for a year and a half. So did they try to play the campaign, or was it just like this the smaller bits or the scenarios? I'm not saying they didn't play test Campaign for North Africa. I have questions about whether they play tested the whole thing. So okay, so a time for trumpets is actually another example I was thinking of bringing up because I had it and I clipped it was clipping it on this very show. And then looking at the rules, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm okay with the 5 or 6 other Bulge games I've got. I liked what some of the things that I felt like it was doing, like with command and stuff like that. But I thought those rule books were incredibly messy, disorganized, and bloated, and not at all intended as a teaching tool. So I got I don't know that I sold it, but I got rid of it somehow. Maybe I sold it. I don't know. In fact sell it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The stuff I've been looking at lately, I've checked a couple of things just today, and it does not say punched or unpunched. So, I mean, we might argue this, but we could also probably say that back in that day, probably very little was adequately play tested, especially on an SPI like playtest schedule or release schedule, I should say. I would agree with the statement that playing something big like that requires several players, ideally at least 4. For deck, I think you could. I think you could do 4. I think I would be reluctant to split deck more ways than that. For CNA, one might approach it by handing one person that really likes paperwork most of the paperwork. So there's that. Yeah, but again, they should say, because that is the word that wargamers are looking for, is punched or unpunched. This is the kind of thing that I think would have been in character for Richard Berg to say, my understanding. Roger Hemseth laughs at your puny calling Edelweiss unplayable, and it doesn't look unplayable to me. I mean, it's certainly big. So if somebody wants to decide I'm not going to deal with that, then okay, I get that. But unplayable, it doesn't look like it. So I mean, I've been wrong before too. So there's that. All right, so we got about 40 more counters to clip here. So let's buzz through some comments here. ATPO. ATPO. Do we mean APTO rulebook? Because that rulebook was kind of a nightmare. The West War series, this is the John Shetler West War series. The Italian campaign games, those are a mess. I kind of got those knowing that was going to be a project, but fortunately, I didn't pay more than $3 or $4 for any of those issues. So Marty clarifies that Empires in Arms is very playable. Perry Sparopoulos says Vassal makes monster games playable for him. I don't believe that. If we're talking again, we're talking about CNA. I do not believe this. I think that is absolutely a thing that Berg said later on. I don't believe it. I don't believe that that was his intention from the beginning. Did he maybe slip some satirical bullshit into it? Yeah, I think he did, but I don't think the whole game is just an overwrought joke. Um, all right, Todd Cox just started the largest ASL Red Barricades scenario. I've played it with Count. We didn't play through the whole thing, admittedly, but I've played Red Barricades with physical pieces, and it's a lot. So, and that's been a long time. Actually, Bill Sisler was in that game. Thinking about it, Pizza Frenzy Man, thank you so much for the support. It is much appreciated. I apologize if I haven't gotten to your any super chats or super stickers. I will get to them. I am just working through the chat, which is once again at 167 people. It's going really heavy. So Pizza Frenzy Man says SPI Air War is unplayable. I have never seen Air War. I don't believe I will ever investigate Air War. I have enough air games. I'm not that interested in air games. FS Mora says no game is really unplayable. It's just a secluded cabin in the woods to which you lured your friends under false pretenses isn't secluded enough, or you did not bring enough duct tape. Maybe they've changed this on the website, but not on the eBay listings. So all right. Steel Wolves, big project. Hanut. Oh, I mean, I think all day sounds about right, to be honest. Even the magazine, the stripped down magazine game is still complicated, right? I would say very complicated by the standards of magazine games, which tend to be relatively compact and relatively straightforward most of the time. Certainly, there are exceptions. Um, Matt Taylor mentions Long Street's Assault by Xeno Games. I have no experience with that. Ronald Nickinson very astutely points out opportunity cost. You lose the opportunity, sinking all that time into one game means you're not spending it on a game that you may potentially be having a better time with. And that's I don't know, a completely valid judgment to make, right? If you decide, I'd rather be playing whatever than dealing with fixing this other thing, then yeah, that's fine. Or just setting it up. I mean, there's certainly people who will lose their minds at the idea of a 20 man hour setup, right? Jed Kennedy, thank you for the support. It is much appreciated. So, the decision thing in the works is called North African Campaign, and that makes me strongly suspect that it will, in fact, not be a new edition of Campaign for North Africa, that it will be a completely different thing, which might be interesting in its own right. But I have not super duper high confidence that if you're there looking for a graphical update of Campaign for North Africa, I'm not positive that's what you're going to get in that package. And the fact that they're not even calling it Campaign for North Africa anymore, and I think they were at one point, or at least I don't know if that nomenclature change happened before it got actually put up for pledge, because you could pledge for this, um, or whether it was that happened after, like in the scuttlebutt phase when they started talking about it. That's possible. I might not have. I don't know, man. I suspect that disorganization status is so fundamental that I think the only way I would feel comfortable fixing it is by, like, exhaustively playtesting whatever fixes I was putting through. It's pretty, I know that. Compass Games Barlev, and that's basically a complete redesign from the original too. Roger Hemsath says Stigler is wrong about Highway to the Right. Some people had a great time with Highway to the Right. I think Stigler raises a lot of very good points in his uh, long and brutal takedown of that game. Again, though, I think there's problems you could fix, but maybe you don't want to deal with that, and that's fine. Heard from Rollo Baker says he's heard from several SPI sources. CNA playtested by a group of more than 5 on and off for several time periods in specific segments. Not a standard playtesting for sure. Maybe. This is true. Stigler has put his money where his mouth is in this case, and you can go to his video and argue with him there as far as the specific points that he. I didn't screw this up, did I? No. The specific points that he is making. Um, so yeah, okay. We're good. We're good. We're good. I thought I messed up the Iraqis. Did you know there was Iraqis in this conflict? I did not. So, Clark Commando 1983. Mark, thanks for stopping by as usual. Glad to see you here. Yeah, I mean, I knew that they had play tested it, but I didn't know Joe gave us more details than I had available. That's for sure. Um, so I listened to that podcast, and that's part of Fred's series on Civil War games with Stuart. And I do feel like Stuart was reasonably clear on this particular point that he thought it was unplayable for him, not necessarily unplayable in an absolute sense. And again, I think that is a completely fair judgment statement for any individual to make. If they decide this is just too much for me, then fine, it's too much for you, no problem. I don't actually agree with Mark on this, but I mean, and yet Mark says he's played it, right? So I don't know if how exactly Mark put it off the top of my head. So now again, as Ron pointed out, there's an opportunity cost just to dedicating that amount of time. You are looking at an absolutely friggin' monumental amount of time that you would be sinking into that Pacific War strategic scenario. And I think very few people are going to want to dedicate that to a single game unless that is their game, right? They have made the call that this is the game we're going to play, right? Joe Perez mentions that this was Jay Nelson going through his line of supply and the line of communication phases simultaneously. I found this. This is not an impenetrable rule book. Crown of Roses. I think you can figure it out from the rule book, but it's not as clear as it would like to be. Let me put it that way. It is far from the worst rule book I have ever seen, but it is also far from the best. Possibly the worst rule book I have ever seen might be that first edition Goss rule book, because that thing is just terrible. But that's a combination of factors too. It's not just that the rule book is terrible, it's that the rule book is terrible and it's a super complicated game anyway, which magnifies the problem. All right. Well, Mark Hodgkinson, just move to Columbus, Ohio, and you can join us. It'll be great. I think that the East Front series is relatively straightforward in a lot of ways. I think the supply system I think is a little weird, but then again, by the time I looked at it, I was already playing OCS, and that's probably a factor. But what are we at? 7th Infantry Division here, yeah. Man, some of these Syrian infantry divisions are friggin' huge. So, all right, let's move up here. Uh, That's Le Grand Guerre is not the only As Your Wish game on my wish list, but I like I said before, I suspect that all of them will be games I never actually end up having, just because of the sheer difficulty factor in obtaining them. La Révolution Française is on that list, and Russia 1917 are also on that list. Games on the French Revolution and Russian Civil War, respectively. Russia is one of the very few Russian Civil War games that I don't have already. Not that there's been that many. That's kind of the neat thing about that conflict is you can kind of accumulate the entire corpus on it. Frank Davis says USN looks great, but it was one of the first buoys in Pacific game design. Played the S&T magazine version. So Frank says skip to USN Deluxe. So that's actually Frank. I feel like that is a huge recommendation. So thank you for that. Yeah, I think I saw this. This is the one I was talking about on Facebook Market Content Marketplace, and that's a good price for Le Grand Guerre. There's a decent amount of video. I don't know that there's much tutorial video per se, but there's a decent amount of video, including some of mine on GBACW. You can even go in there and see Stigler yelling at us for bunging up certain rules. So if you monitor the chat from those live sessions, I have had PQ17 for a long time too. It wasn't one of my first. I don't know what one of my first would have been, but it might have been one of the Ancient World games or the East Front games. Either one of those is possible. All right. Consensus is that our Armada was busted. I mean, we're kind of talking about unplayable due to however many factors that lead to that conclusion. Jeff Beeler asks, in the Gamer Civil War Brigade Tactical Combat Series and Napoleonic Brigade Series, is this unplayable? Having played Line of Battle, my position on this is you may not like it, but it is absolutely not unplayable. Now, that system's a little bit lighter in Line of Battle than it was in previous incarnations of that series, but there we go. Looking for the lid because I don't like to have these things floating around with no lids. That's how unhappiness occurs. So I say playable. Now again, you might decide you don't like dealing with it. That's totally fair, but not unplayable by any means. Third armored, yeah. Fifth mountain. Okay, what are we doing here? Fifth mountain, which is an Iraqi formation. Sixth armored, and then third armored. Okay, very good. All right. This is a completely fair statement. Sometimes I'm interested enough in the topic that I'm willing to work on it. Original BCS rules were I agree with this, pretty confusing. Fortunately even the 2.0 rule, even I think it's 1.1 or 1.2, even those rules were a big improvement in clarity, but there's a significant amount of fine tuning that's sometimes really subtle between any of the BCS 1 family and BCS 2.0 that I think makes BCS 2 plus whatever they're on now by far the preferable system. So happy birthday, Nordic Maelstrom. Nordic Maelstrom, we are clipping Valley of Tears. John Sakalaris mentions the Empires and Arms campaign games, numerous rules disputes. Yeah, I feel like that's comes with the territory based on the kind of game that it is, to be fair. And Frank says, is unfinishable considered unplayable? I'd say no, because at some point you might have been having a great time, and then you just might have decided you wanted to move on to something else. We had a fabulous time with Blitzkrieg, but by the end of it, after like 8 months of that, we were ready to move on to something else, right? So I got no issue with that at all. Some people will not be fully satisfied unless they have finished the game. And I am not necessarily one of those people. But I am also not one of those people that just wants to throw in the towel based on the one turn of bad rolls happening to me. If I was, I would probably have picked another hobby by now. We'll see, William Aaron's. We'll see. So I got some news out of this that after Army Group South comes through. So next in the East Front Series pipeline is the second edition of Army Group North. We should see that in 2024. After that is Army Group South. Now, in a sense, Army Group South is the smallest of the games in terms of unit density, not in terms of map footprint. So supposedly they expect that to take less time. So maybe we'll see that in 2025. It's possible. Certainly, it doesn't need to worry about making its number. It made its number like 15 years ago. After that, the intention is apparently to redo Typhoon. And then after that, the objective is to do the long awaited Stalingrad module. So we'll see if any of that happens. I hope that it does. Well, some people might decide this is a fair point. Some people might decide that Flat Top is unplayable because of all the paperwork. There's a number of other games that's going to be true of as well, not just Campaign for North Africa. I mean, the old Stellar Conquest from originally from Metagaming, but I had it in the Avalon Hill version. That had a decent amount of paperwork in it. A lot of people didn't like it because of that reason. They said it felt too much like keeping score at the bowling alley. And they're not wrong about that. It kind of does. But I loved the hell out of that game, nevertheless. So to me, that doesn't. I am told by Mark that they did play test it, that they played it through. I think once, maybe twice. So is that adequate play testing? Maybe not, but it might also be what you were going to get at that point. The complexion of the hobby is a little bit different now. Maybe I shouldn't use the word complexion. But like the dynamic of how playtesting happens at the hobby is a little different now than it was back in the mid 80s, right? On the one hand, they had like a staff, but on the other hand, now it's a lot of old people that are donating their time. So and we have the internet, so it's easier to corral a group of playtesters. If I design a giant monster game, which we might see more on in the next couple of weeks, if I design a giant monster game, I don't have to just play it in the room right here, right? I can put in a vassal module together and circulate it and have people play testing it all over the place. So, and that would be my intention, right? Might as well leverage the technology that we have to get better playtesting in. I know people who have finished this campaign game. I will tell you that. It takes a long time. But I will tell you that that there are people who have finished it. Now, I also know people who prefer to start in like 42, and that's fine too. Or people who prefer to start at the beginning and stop in mid 42, where Fire in the East stops, and I think that's a completely legitimate place to be as well. And so I have not mentioned this. Doug, thanks for stopping by. The Tabletop's Edge. You should all go to subscribe to that channel immediately. So TSWW is the Second World War series from Diffraction Entertainment or the Knowledge Company or whatever they're calling themselves nowadays. I think the wargame part of it is still called Diffraction Entertainment. And there's a lot to like there, but this was one of those decisions where I said to myself after having read the rules, no, I am not doing this. So, like I said, it does have its fans, so not unplayable in an absolute sense. But I mean, a lot of people are going to just draw the line and say, "Nah, I'm not dealing with this decimal DRM. Screw that. I don't want to deal with that." Well, in terms of sheer footprint, this is true, but you can also, again, do this on Vassal. There's a consolidated Vassal module for all that stuff. I don't know if the West War rules sucked as a larger series. What I can tell you is that the Italian campaign quartet in S&T is a friggin' mess. So I think there's something interesting there, but you again, you're going to have to put the time into it. So Fucko is begging Doug for new videos. I agree. I will also beg for new videos. So Doug, if you're going to get one of these fancy at Winterfest, you're going to get one of these fancy parts holding trays for each video you have done between now and February. How about that? So Joe says that CNA tested. They played multiple plays, but they didn't last more than the first year because of continued tuning, which I find completely believable. Yeah, every once in a while, somebody will set this all up as a stunt. There are some integration issues playing these games together. That's one of the driving forces behind the new additions is to kind of smooth those things over. To what extent that would make it more play? I don't know that it'll make it more playable necessarily. It's still going to be a difficult thing to pull off, right? So, some fantastic. I literally it goes to the top of my playlist as soon as it shows up. So, so there was a revised rule book for War of the Suns. I don't know that it's perfect, but it is an improvement, and that it is the one we will be playing with when we eventually play War of the Suns. That is a fascinating part of World War II that we tend not to give very much attention to at all. So I think we're almost caught up to the chat here. Okay, so John Stanley asks, due to the large amount of code breaking in World War II, are the multi-day games unplayable due to the lack of information the Allied leaders received on Axis movements? So this is not different from the standard, war game problem of lack of fog of war. The war game player has more information available than the historical commander did. Um, I certainly don't think that this informs playability in any way. Um, it's also certainly an issue that war games just kind of have to either try to deal with or just ignore. And I think either of those two strategies is actually viable. Did I do? Yes, I did. Very good. I'm probably going to wait till after the show to do the last couple of counters actually, because I gotta dig around in the other counter train. Stigler says that Air War flows very smoothly once you know what you're doing. Surprisingly smooth. GDW's air superiority is much better. I have no knowledge of either game. I cannot comment on them. John Zagalaris says that in references to Frank's comments on Unfinishable, he'll put away an otherwise very playable old favorite, House Divided, because it takes so long to finish the game. Really? How long does it take to play that? I didn't think that. I've never played that, but it's supposed to be good. I'd like to try it, but I'm not going to go run down a copy. Somebody's going to have a copy in my presence at some point. So they Andrew Atkin, they have the rights. They literally own the rights. So they could redo the original if they wanted. I think it would be not maybe a great idea to even try to redo the original, but as Marty says, I believe that's basically a completely new game. Probably inspired in part by the original, but I think it's probably best to regard it as an entirely new project on basically the same scale. And honestly, of less interest to me because I already have a couple of games at that basic scale. I mean, I could play DAC or DAC 2 if I wanted to. HTTR is Highway to the Right. 2 editions from SPI, 1 from Decision. And they're all not exactly airtight. Let me put it that way. All right. So that's third Dredanian armored. Second motorized. 5th Mountain Brigade. And I am using, by the way, both the 2 compartment dividers and the 3 compartment dividers for this game. We have some small formations and we have some enormous formations. These Syrian infantry divisions are just friggin' huge. Yeah, there are some exceptions to the SPI catalog that Decision owns. We talked about that with Doc when we interviewed him. So go check that video out. Well, yes, don't get disrupted, but no. John Butterfield is redoing Hell's Highway. I appreciate that it's confusing. It is easy to get all of the different highways confused. But remember that in the Netherlands, there's only one highway that they could go on. I know that's an oversimplification, but still, Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Mo, thanks for stopping by. Compass catalog. I will defer my Compass expenses till November, second week of November. The EFS games all have small scenarios, small to medium sized scenarios in them too. So it's not like you're stuck with that. David Thompson, thanks for stopping by. Joe Perez says that there was a lot of back and forth about what to do with the 1940 CNA Italians scenario. So yes, I found that out. I know jack about this affair. Okay, it happened in 1973 in October, and there were Arabs and Israelis. That's kind of all I knew, right? Until literally a couple of months ago when I'm like, oh shit, I gotta buy this. So I read the Wikipedia article on it. That is literally the extent of my research on this topic. So this is often true, yeah, of Europa games, and this is true of a lot of bigger games too. This is true of Whiff too. So Mark Hodgkinson asks, where are the Decision Games rules? Fall of France. Fall of France is a turd. I'm pulling up Decisions E rules and let's see what we got here. So if this actually works, I will. Nope, that does not work. So if anybody knows where the Axis Empire's new edition rules are to be downloaded, it isn't Decision Games website in the obvious place. I think there's a lot to like about that series. There's also some features of it that I don't like. I don't like the soak off attacks, for example. I think it's like less dependent on those than like Anzio, but because there's going to be like space between units, right? You're going to have lines, but they're not going to be these contiguous mountain lines that one typically sees in most OCS East Front games a lot of the time. So, I think that's fine. Hispania, as wish Hispania is actually an interesting looking game too. Am I actually this far behind? I'm about 15 minutes behind in the chat, meandering Mike. I apologize for that. I would agree with Stigler's statement here that written orders are fertile ground for rules lawyers. Don't play those games with those people. All right. Frank says he will pay $100 to anyone who posts a video of a complete playthrough of Seas of Thunder. I believe that is going to have a long play time. Let me put it that way for the campaign. Dale Brady, thank you so much for the support. It is much appreciated. On OSG, I would let your topical interest guide you here. If you're interested in Waterloo, get Napoleon's Last Gamble. If you're interested in the France campaign of 1814 is actually very interesting. So La Patrie en Danger, I think, is actually worth your time. Otherwise, there's a 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 Peninsular War games at this point. I think the new Four Lost Battles is a good one. It's that 1813 campaign in Germany. That's a good campaign as well. So Mo says that he avoids unplayable games from hearing that they are bad, or he'll read the rules and see if it sounds good or not. I will often look at the rules, and sometimes I'll take a peek at the Vassal module and decide whether I'm going to get into it or not. I have done that a lot less lately because I'll frankly, that's probably because I'm too decisive and fuck it, I'll buy it. And then I buy it and decide, I didn't need this. I mean, I decided that with North Africa 41, which I think is probably terrific. And I just don't have room for it in my life. So I'm probably going to put it on the chopping block. I love paperwork. I am a born accountant, except I didn't have. I'm not. So I'm trying to find the stacking limit comment on this that we're referring to. 10,000. Okay, so stacking limit has made a $10,000 offer. Ah, there you go. This is a good one where you got to turn the unit hall face down at the end of the turn. I mean, certainly a lot of bookkeeping, and this is why there's a lot of detail that can be kept. So if you look at, say, Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2, even War in the East 1 is like this. You can actually like detach a lot of the elements of a particular unit and assign them to other units if you want. That's the kind of thing that would be monstrously complicated. Even the most diehard paper pushers are not going to like that if they if the computer's not helping them. So I I consider Puerto Rico not worth my time just because of what it is. I have Conquistador. I mean, it's it's sloppy history, and it's you know I don't have a problem with people playing a game like Conquistador. Just we recognize that this is sloppy history. I mean that's all. Certainly, it's not the only game you could say that about. Federation and Empire, of course, is loaded with paperwork as well. Oh Jesus, we got the adult dating people out here. Ban user. Let's get rid of them. Um, yeah, and some machetes, I think. I mean, it's certainly possible to create a tasteless game. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I not saying that I don't think taboo is the right word. If the game is is a reflection of is illustrating the history in a useful way, then to me, whether somebody finds that subject matter upsetting is I mean, I respect them their position on that. They don't have to play it. Um, so Mark, this would be awesome for your incoming thing in 2045. So there we go. I might be a half an hour behind here. I'm really trying to catch up. Steve has done a bunch of stuff on large games. Yeah, and that's another channel I'll recommend everybody subscribe to, is Steve Doge's channel. Unplayable is personal, and I started out with this as well. We can say unplayable, and a lot of people will take that as, well, it's just unplayable. But what we really mean is it's unplayable for us due to whatever confluence of factors that drive us to make that decision. So, and there's people literally arguing the fact that this itself illustrates the point. Several people, I don't even remember who, said SPI's Air War is unplayable, and several other people have chimed in and said, no, it's not unplayable at all. We were talking about, we played it. Um, so now maybe it sucks, but that's different, right? That's a different question. All right, we're trying to catch up here. So Paulson, welcome back to the show. Mo mentions doesn't do Napoleonics, but does do American Revolution. I will do a lot more Napoleonics than American Revolution, but I've become more interested in American Revolution. But I think that for like tactical American Revolution, while one could explore like great Battles of the Age of Reason, I really feel like Battles of the American Revolution is doing all I need tactical American Revolution to do. I don't know why there's quotes here. There's no quotes. They bought them. I mean, that's it. So TSR shittily dealt with. So we didn't directly talk about this, but I hinted at it in one of the things I said to Doc during the interview. TSR came to them, which I found very interesting because they were publishing S&T by then. And at that particular time, TSR was in a shit ton of financial trouble. So they were probably looking to peel off a bunch of properties that they had no proper use for anyway. So Decision probably got it for a good deal. But there's no need for scare quotes here. They actually paid for it. So The drop zones thing. Nobody's going to argue with that. If you just allow units to drop wherever in Market Garden, you were going to break the game. That's just the way it is. So I am finding that my tastes are changing over the last 5 years or so, and I'm much more interested in Napoleonics and Civil War than I was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Um, I'm more interested in American Revolution, but I'm kind of getting a late start on that. I've got about six maybe eight American Revolution games. Um, I've got a shitload of Napoleonic and Civil War games at this point. And at this point, I feel like it, besides World War II, which almost everybody plays a lot of, I feel like my preferred periods are Napoleonic and Civil War. So, for whatever that's worth. All right, we're trying to catch up. We got the spammers out of the way. Okay, so we're getting some comparisons between the Central Front series and GBACW. I may have a copy of BAOR. I'm working on a deal for that. So yeah, I've got I probably have, because of the way I have the collection stored, it's probably more than the 6 or 7. I've got a couple of magazine games on the American Revolution. I've got just the tri-pack for the Battles of the American Revolution. I've got Washington's Crossing. I've got 1776. I've got Liberty or Death. So I got a decent amount of American Revolution games. I feel like tactical is not generally of like strategic, operational, tactical. Tactical is the one that I'm least interested in, and I am pretty much not interested in tactical in anything pre 20th century except for World War II. Um, I think I said that wrong. In anything that's not pre 20th century except for World War II. I will do tactical Civil War, Napoleonics, or Ancients, or whatever. That's cool. I will probably not ever want to do modern Korean War or Vietnam or anything like that. Eric Hansen is obsessed with Levian campaign. That's not, you're not unique in that respect. So yeah, they got a tri-pack 2 coming. And those are really nice looking games in terms of nice, clean, tidy rule set. I don't expect it there to give a lot of people much trouble. You can play them in any of them in a sitting, all of them that I've seen anyway. So I am probably going to need to put up another shelf. I have an idea of where that could go, like a shelf that I can get about another 6 to 8 feet of shelf. And that will not really free up a ton of space, but it will give me a little more flexibility to work on some things. So, if you're going to sell stuff off, Noble Knight's not a terrible choice. You can also sell stuff off to Enterprise Games. I'll tell you that. Yeah, and MREV Pack 2 is somewhere in the P500 mil as well. I have pre-ordered that. I got no compunctions pre-ordering that. Levian campaign is kind of the new coin. It has taken away a little bit of coins gas, I think, but it's not like there's still not plenty of coin games in the pipeline, right? So there's that. I don't know if I'm prepared to have an opinion on this. I will say that you're not going to get top dollar if you trade a game into a game store. Okay, you're just not. However, by that standard, Noble Knight will give you a pretty good rate. So in general, as far as how much punching and clipping it will make a difference, I'm not sure. Now, if we're talking about like operational Vietnam, and I frankly consider this operational more than anything else, then you can absolutely talk me into that. or potentially strategic. But in my opinion, I'm interested enough in the history that I would prefer to play a wargamier treatment than one is afforded by, say, something like Hearts and Minds. Uh, about as abstract I am willing to get on that topic is pretty much Fire in the Lake, which is very good, by the way. So a lot of people like modern tactical. I'm just not into it. Interested. David Garvin, thank you for stopping by. Much appreciated and welcome. So it's interesting. I was thinking about this while cutting my 8 hours cutting the grass saga. And I feel like those who served and who play war games tend to have one of two reactions to modern material. One is that they don't want to be anywhere near it, and the other is that is their one of their primary areas of interest. I have seen those who served have both opinions on the way out, and that may have something to do with their experiences on the inside, right? Um, so I am. Matt, maybe I should get T-shirts made that say this. That would be fun. Merch store, folks. I do have the "What Would George Thomas Do" T-shirts, which I didn't prepare a slide of, but those are available in the merch store. Get them while they're hot. And there will be more of those coming, but it's a pain in the ass because spring because there's a modified photograph on each one, and they keep blocking them, and I have to fight my way through their bureaucracy process. Okay, so Marty says Noble Knight prices will definitely be below the market rate, especially if they already have a lot of copies, but you can't beat the convenience factor. Yeah, that's true. You could just say, hey, I got this, and this, and they'll ask some questions, I guess, and then they'll pay for you to put it in a box and ship it to them. And they'll give you either cash or store credit. And I can think of few war game retailers that store credit would be less awesome, right? I'm not sure that's coming out correctly. But I'd be, there's plenty to spend your store credit on at Noble Knight. Let me put it that way. That's true of Enterprise Games too, but Noble Knight's website's a little easier to navigate too. And a lot easier to navigate. Let's be fair. So I agree with this as a general principle. Whether we're talking about modern or not. I'd kind of like to see the challenges and decisions made by the different sides, right? That includes the sides that is staffed by unlikable fuckers. So I think it's fine to do that. And that's independent of whatever my personal opinion is on the subject. Oh, apparently FedEx will even pick it up at the door. That's pretty cool. Garrison Venn, thank you so much. Library of Napoleonic Battles series. So yeah, this is, I think, Marcus Stumpter's alternate rules for Library of Napoleonic Battles. Some people like them. I think the motivation for those alternate rules is that some people don't feel that the system is bloody enough. I think that's a completely deliberate and legitimate design choice that is based on the scale of the game. But if you want a bloodier experience, then by all means check out Marcus's rules on this. And I think you can use those with basically any of the games in this series. The really none of the games have a ton of game specific rules, right? It's all about stuff like, okay, so you've got these special wagons in this scenario or whatever. Some of the Peninsular War scenarios will have guerrillas, for example. But there's really not a lot of game specific rules. And so I think it'd be very easy to basically play any of the games in that system. That said, I'm happy enough with we'll see what I think after we play this next game. And I wouldn't mind trying those alternate rules, but I'm not totally displeased with the actual rules that come in the box either. So I bought a shitload of stuff from Noble Knight. I bought a lot of I bought some Europa and I bought some RuneQuest, and when we were there, I bought a pile of S&Ts with games and other miscellaneous things out of their junk room. Um, I bought a couple of fairly high priced items in from Noble Knight as well, just because it's like they have it right. When the time came to buy Second Front, I'd been looking for like a year for something at a price I wanted to pay, and it just wasn't coming up. So finally, I said, "Well, fuck it, I'll order it from Noble Knight. I'm going to pay at the higher end of that range, but if there's a problem, they will fix it." And I bought it, and there was no problem, so they didn't need to fix it. So there's that. Um, that is accurate. I did have some issues with a couple of Europa acquisitions where I had unusably misregistered counter sheets. None of those came from Noble Knight, and I was able to source replacement counter sheets in both cases. This is incredibly quaint and hilarious now, isn't it? Now that you can for a shrink wrapped copy of Case Blue, you might be able to get $1,100 for it. You might be able to. I'm not saying that's the going rate, but you can absolutely, if you put a shrink wrapped Case Blue up on the Consim World Marketplace on Facebook for 650, it'll be gone in under an hour. So, and it might not take an hour. I I've become more interested in Vietnam too. I read Max Hastings' book on Vietnam, which I know has some issues, but it's what was available. So I read that, and it is a fascinating conflict at all dimensions. So I'm interested in doing more Vietnam, but I'm not particularly interested in doing tactical Vietnam. And probably 65% of the all the games that we've ever seen on Vietnam have been tactical games. To be fair, there's reasons for that, right? You can model that at a tactical level without that much trouble, where it's much more difficult to model at the operational or strategic level. Yeah, and NLC in this context means I think Napoleon's later campaigns. So I mean, I will agree with this. I mean, I've been saying this about the Ukraine conflict for since it started. There's some things in the works. The only of those things that I think is going to be worth any serious look is the thing that Mark Herman is working on with David Doctor, and that's not the whole conflict. That's just like the Kiev part of it, as far as I know. So that's going to be intriguing to see. And to be blunt, the reason why I'm interested in that is because Mark's working on it, right? I think if there's somebody we could trust to not screw this up, it is Mark. So I'm willing to give that a look. Yeah, I bounced off of this series. I do notice that so there's 4 games in this series now, I think that's correct, and 2 of them are hypotheticals, and I'm just not interested in those hypotheticals. It's not that I'm not interested in those hypotheticals, it's that I got a kind of a lot of games on that exact situation, and I don't wanna learn another one. I'm very happy with NATO and Third World War, and I got a couple of the Central Front games now, and plus the Thin Red Line stuff. I'm freaking good. I don't need any more on modern hypothetical NATO versus Warsaw Pact. So you got to really do something special to for that to get my attention. So I have not seen the Ken Burns Vietnam. I'm trying to think if I've seen anything besides the Civil War one, and I haven't seen the Civil War one since it was like on PBS. So a lot of those Ken Burns documentaries are on Netflix or were on Netflix. I haven't checked lately. So the funny, I mean, well, and all the Ken Burns documentaries are worthwhile. Let me put it that way. John C says they were on Netflix, but now they're gone. This may depend internationally too, so it's worth checking. Also check Amazon if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber. No, I'm pretty reluctant to buy another Bulge game. You could talk me into another Gettysburg game if it was at the right scale. If there's another Gettysburg Regimental, I probably would say no. But if it was, if I could find, well, I don't want to say if I could find. I'll say if I were to come across a brigade scale Gettysburg game that I thought was interesting, I probably would grab it. So. But right now, I'm more. Several months ago, if you'd asked me this exact question, I'd have said Napoleonics. Right now, I'm saying Civil War. It's a topic I'm super duper into at this exact moment. Where do we have extra dividers? I don't have a lot more of uh, the twos. I can scavenge some. And I'm gonna make, like I said, I'm gonna probably I set up a batch to print 15 of these at a time, so which only takes like 2 or 3 hours. All right, traffic markers go there. More traffic the individual sides get their own traffic markers in this game. I'm very impressed with that. The Ken Burns baseball thing, I've seen that. That's pretty good. I didn't think of that. So, so we are bridges, whatever the hell this thing is. Um, these here. And that is it, folks. We have finished clipping Valley of Tears. Let me make sure these lids are secure before I do this. And it is all in 2 counter trays, not even quite 2. Now I didn't do the markers because I keep the markers for the series in a separate box. Those table trays. So, I'm not super duper interested in like medieval stuff. I could get, like I said, for tactical, I'm happy with Men of Iron. Um, for I should probably unload Commands and Colors American Revolution. It's supposed to be really good. And actually, when I was at the guard tower in Columbus, couple of weeks ago, there were some people playing that. Actually, I think they might have been playing Jacobites instead of American Revolution. Eric Goebel, thanks very much appreciated. The support is much appreciated as well. Have a great night. I mean, it better start with the French, right? Or with the French. David Garvin, if you're in Columbus, Ohio, we can get you set up with with OCS. But assuming you're not, yeah, there's an avid OCS community. You won't have a particularly difficult time finding vassal opponents. The vassal modules range from good to very good. So you've got good support. You can download any of the excess materials. It's I think OCS is. I mean, assuming that you don't mind the idiosyncrasies of OCS, like this way you track supply and all that. Some people really hate that. If you don't hate that, then you might have a great time with OCS. What I like is the puzzle dynamic of it. That's my personal favorite thing about OCS, and a number of other games that share that feature. He's unfortunately not in Ohio, Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia. A whole bunch of folks from the Maritimes have been on lately, actually. So, plausibly, this is plausible, right? Boy, it was a mess, and we didn't make it less messy. Let's face it. Um, there you go. Everybody needs to retire. What we need to do is crowdfund a wargamer retirement community, where we could play all the OCS games we want, um, and and poop in a diaper, if that should become necessary. That's what we really need. So if anybody wants to finance that, ardwulfslair@gmail.com, let me know. So I didn't watch this, the jazz one. They got to stop somewhere, right? Although jazz itself does not stop in 1970, and no, the intro music is not smooth jazz. Um, if it was smooth jazz, I would have made fun of it by now. It is just jazz. There is a difference. Smooth jazz is the stuff that makes you go. Slackers Con. I think I heard something about this. That might be interesting. So, if it depends on the counters, right? If I can fit them in the box, I will generally fit them in the box. Um, However, what I use are this is a large example. I've done a video on this, so go check out the Storage Solutions video on these. These come in two sizes. I get them from the Container Store, and this is the larger size. This was the BCS tray until I split it into two smaller ones, so you could keep one on either side of the table. And the nice thing about these is the lids stack underneath them, so you could keep the two-sided tray is about something like that, 6, 7. Yeah, I think it's 7, 2 by 7, something like that. So they're reasonably compact. You can get your greasy little fingers in there. I'm actually working on 3D printed inserts to give them curved bottoms. It'd be easier to get them out. That's for series games. That's what I tend to store my markers in. And sometimes it's one tray and sometimes it's two trays. But that way you could keep one on either side of the table. Everybody's got the markers. But what ends up happening in practice is that you're not like returning the markers to the counter tray when you're done with them. You're keeping them in a little pile by the map, and that is what we use these for. And this is why I have 40 of them for my personal use. So I don't like to just mix all the markers up. These trays, this bigger one might cost $10. I think the 14 compartment, they're called clear compartment boxes on the Container Store website. You can order them online. And I want to say they're about $7 or $8 a piece, the 14 compartment ones. The big ones are really kind of too big. And the only thing I have in these huge ones anymore is Pacific War, which I will eventually come up with a solution for. James Whitmer says U.S. Civil War and Twilight Struggle are a lot of fun, but I don't have Imperial Struggle yet. Copy on order from J&J's. I don't know who J&J's is. I assume that's a retailer of some kind. U.S. Civil War is fantastic. Twilight Struggle is a good game. It's not one of my personal favorites, but it's a good game. Imperial Struggle I kind of bounced off of. I felt like it was inevitable that was going to be disappointing considering the extremely high regard everybody, including me, holds Twilight Struggle in. Yeah, I like this. I like the 14 compartment ones better. Like I said, I have designed, and I don't know that I've prototyped them yet, some inserts to go in these compartments to give them a rounded bottom so the counters are easier to extract. Because the bottoms, there's two downsides to these trays. One, they're this clear, hard plastic. I think they'll be brittle. I've never dropped one. I might have dropped a lid, but it didn't break, so I'm good. They might have some brittleness issues, and they are extremely rectangular, so it can be hard to get like the last couple of chits out of it. So I'm working on that. So although I know Mo, who came up with those inserts, those cardboard dividers for GMT counter trays. Was that you, or are you just the foremost advocate of those? Because I poo-pooed those because I didn't want to really deal with the paper crafts. But I 3D print them now in both 2 compartment and 3 compartment versions. And if you're going to use GMT trays, unless you're organizing like Cedar Mountain or something, they're really super duper handy. I'm probably a little farther than you away from that, Phil, I'm afraid. So, yeah, you'd never finish this, to be honest. I'm looking at these. This tray looks like, oh, so mine are 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter in all dimensions. I couldn't get them any thinner. They were a little too thin and too flimsy. I think the bottom layer, so the upright parts are 1 millimeter. I think this bottom layer is actually 0.6 millimeters. That sounds right. Because I print with a point 0.2 layer height. So I wanted to make sure that this bottom was as thin as possible while still being stable. So it's 3 layers, right? And I wanted to eat as little room inside the compartment as possible. So after a bunch of prototypes, I don't have a good way to measure the inside of one of those without doing some kind of asinine Play-Doh trick, which I did not do. So I designed it and I took some measurements and I printed one and made some more adjustments and printed a new one and made some more adjustments and printed a new one. But the thickness on these is I don't think it's a problem at that point. So on the two compartment trays, I can easily get 4 stacks in that half a GMT compartment. And in the 3 compartment trays, I can get 2 stacks. And on these particular counters, those stacks can be about 8 high. And I sized the height of the dividers such that they come right up to the bottom of the lid. So I know there's some manufacturer variation in the lids, but yeah, those are interesting trays, actually. I think I'd have probably investigated that were I not doing the 3D printed stuff at this point. Um, so oh, this glass, Chris K. Are we talking about this glass? The Ardwulf Lair pint glass? I'm very happy with the way those turned out. Took a while for them to ship it to me. They ship t-shirts very quickly within 2 or 3 days. They take a little longer with most other things. Oh God. The yeah, see, this is the problem here, man. If you could like have a computer play these battles out for you, that might be cool. But a 22 versus 28 ships in Starfleet battles is itself a friggin' monster game. Okay, so I don't know if those trays were intended for Europa, but yes, John, those are the trays he is talking about. Those Sam, you've seen them as a Europa player. Um, I know they were marketed in the Europa magazine. As far as I know, Sam Racina might even still have some. Because I know some people have gotten some from him relatively recently. But I gave up on trying to source those. Mo knows where you can get them, but I never looked them up. The 1985 game box footprint, not height, is very similar to your Europa box, so those will fit. That said, I'm planning on doing 3D printed trays for the Europa for the 1985 games. So now, what might be the case though is just based on sheer age, they might be super yellow and brittle and nasty. So that's a bit of a problem. I mean, the cardstock ones will be thinner, but I'm not sure you're gaining anything from that because you're still only fitting 4 stacks for for a half a compartment and 2 stacks for a third of a compartment. So I did make sure that it wasn't eating a ton of space inside the tray, though. Height wise was more important than the thickness of the divider. But yeah, as far as I mean, I'm pretty sold on these on on the whole stack tray methodology for a lot of things. But once I started looking at how I was going to looking at the counter sheets and how I was going to store this, and then the amount of space I have in the box, it would have been dumb to do anything other than what I'm doing with these trays. Um, I think GMT trays, as long as you've now, I think you could just you could just double or triple up formations without these dividers, but the dividers will actually make so I know who I'm grabbing, right? As opposed to fishing through a whole compartment with 2 or 3 potential formations in it. So no thanks. John, thanks for stopping by. It is much your presence is much appreciated. And we'll see you soon. Mm, 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 mm. Tasty scotch. This reminds me that sometime in the next week or two, I will be needing to go acquire scotch for Compass Expo. That might be that could even be a Wednesday thing. I'm actually not really aware of a great liquor store for scotch around here. I might just go to one in Columbus. Andrew Etkin, thanks for stopping by. It is your presence is much appreciated as well. We did lose a bunch of people in the last little while here, so I don't know what's up with that, but we actually were above 170 at one point tonight. So that is excellent participation. I will point out, in case anybody has not noticed, that we do have episode 150 coming up, and there will be a giveaway on episode 150 because it's a big number. So, and then we probably won't do a giveaway for 250, but we probably will for 200. But those are a year away, so we will do that on 150, which is only about 6 weeks away. It's going to be after Compass Expo, though. Battle Board Games. Looking forward to seeing everybody there. It's going to be great. It's a great event. I will be delighted to meet everybody new. Irish whiskey. I like Jameson's, for example, and like the better Jameson's is really good. Somebody had, I think it was Jameson's Special Reserve one time, and I'm like, wow, this is good. But even the regular Jameson's, I like. I'll drink that neat. I have no problem with that. I put a little bit of water in it, but I'm pretty much good with that. I'm not going to an airport anytime soon. Although if we were flying into Hartford, that might make sense. But no, we are driving, so flying was a bigger pain in the ass than driving was. So, yeah, John C was all the way there from the sunny Philippines last year. It was fantastic. So, it is a very good event. I haven't have I had Tullamore Dew? I've had Bushmills. I haven't had Redbreast. I think I've had Tullamore Dew, and I liked Jameson's better. 40 Creek Rye. That is Canadian stuff, as I recall, and I have heard good things about that. Is somebody asking about this? Jameson's Black Barrel is probably. I would probably like to investigate that. So I do use. I don't know if this is something I can get in Ohio. I do use OBS for video capture, which is then fed into StreamYard. I can, in principle, just use OBS and not bother with StreamYard, but I lose some capabilities. Or I would have to rebuild those capabilities from scratch in OBS. And as we have found, that is a pain in the nuts, and I don't want to deal with it. I mean, I'm willing to deal with it, but I'm unwilling to spend that much time on it. So it's something that we might eventually see, but I'm not in a rush. I've already used, decided I'm just sticking with StreamYard for the comment highlighting, although I did keep the on-screen comments ticker, which I like. I friggin' hate air travel. I appreciate that it's not even fucking faster, okay? So when I flew a couple of years ago to Hartford for Compass Expo, I was like 9 or 10 hours on that trip, right? Between the wait at the airport, the flight, the layover, the second flight, and then the trip to the hotel. I might as well have driven, right? And then I wouldn't have had to worry, I can't buy this game because I can't put it on my luggage. I mean, it was a huge pain and it was super stressful. I would have been much less stressed if I had just driven. So now the reason I did that was it was a cheap flight, but then you don't consider the amount of time you're taking. I mean, it's like an 8-hour drive. If it's going to take me 8 or 9 hours to fly, fuck it, I'll drive. So plus air travel is sized for children. Okay, the seats on airplanes are sized for friggin' children. There's no one who's comfortable in that seat. Um, so this this is the best idea I've heard all day. Maybe some gummies would help. Um, I was watching somebody on TikTok talking about different strengths of gummies. It's like, man, that's not a gummy. That's a rhinoceros tranquilizer. So maybe that's a good idea. And they confiscated my clippers. I didn't even count that as part of the misery of that experience. It was friggin' miserable. Um, they didn't lose my luggage, but I mean, what a pain in the dick. Um, so Yeah, and I mean, other than then you got the TSA hassles, which you might get groped or your genitals are irradiated, and who wants to deal with that? So sometimes you have to, and that's just the way you got to go. If I was going to San Diego, I was like, well, that's what it is. But because I'm not driving to freaking San Diego, that would take 4 days. But if I can drive, I'll drive, right? Even if it's a long drive. If we go to Winter Offensive, which I don't think is totally impossible, hint, hint, you know who you are. And that's in January. We will totally drive. It's like 5.5 hours from here. That's absolutely drivable. Now, yeah. So I mean, if you live in friggin' Texas, I mean, you're not going to drive to Connecticut. Okay. I get that. And it is possible to fly in 3.5 hours, but that's 3.5 hours in the air. That's not counting the potentially 2 hours at the airport, the potential layover. If you get a direct flight, that's great, but that's not always an option depending on where you're coming from. You may actually, if you're flying out of Houston, you may actually have a little more flexibility. I don't know. Um, but it's a huge hassle. If you could take the train, take the train, but usually that's not an option. If you're going from like um, anywhere off the East Coast, it's probably not an option. Chicago being an example. Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp. Ping that to me on like Facebook or something, and I'll throw it in the chat before we wrap up here. Because I'd like to see the new ones too. Is it on Consim World? Oh, the train is it feels like luxury. I mean, it's not like the old days where there's dining cars. I mean, no, it's not like that. But at least the seats are comfortable. And you can recline, you can get up and walk around. They don't stick their hand in your ass at security. I mean, it's a far more comfortable way to travel. Just it's not incredibly practical here in this country for literally reasons of geography. That there's too much space. I'd love to see high speed rail, but outside of the Eastern Corridor and the Western Corridor, it's not really possible to do that, and it's not economical to do that. I won't say it's not possible. So, in any case, I suppose this is true. I hadn't thought about this. Um, The train, I mean, I've taken a train once and it was like, wow. I mean, it's not like air travel at all if you haven't done it. And this was the train from Delaware to Philly. And so it's up and up that eastern corridor. And it's like you go to the desk, you buy a ticket, and then you get on the train. That's it. And they literally come along at some point later and ask you for your ticket. That's it. There's no X-ray machine. There's no proctological exam. There's no irradiating of your private parts. It's all extremely comfortable. There's leg room. You can recline. It's not like the airplane seat, which reclines, goes like, "What?" No, you can recline on these. It's like a recliner. It's incredible, and believe it or not, there's a couple. Oh geez, Richard Berg did something. Somebody might throw this in the chat, but we are about to wrap up here. So let's wrap up, and maybe this is the ultimate crossover game at some point. The Let's wrap this up for tonight. So there was actual video coming out this week. Tomorrow we are going to have the start of a new series, intermittent series, of course, called Wargame Archaeology, and we're going to have a look at the innards of the next war as it arrived. And I finally got the video edited. We might do one for John Carter as well, and we might do one for some of the other SPI things that I have. And at least at the moment, that's going to be primarily SPI things, unless I get like a Belge 65 or something weird like that. On Thursday morning, you will see an unboxing video of Valley of Tears. And on Thursday evening, we'll have the show with Dan with a very special guest whose identity I don't even know yet. So we'll see what we can scrape up in the meantime. But we will have a very special guest on the show, and that is at 7 p.m. 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So, all right, folks. I hadn't even thought of this, but yeah, this is probably true. But in any case, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Please thumbs up the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to help support the channel, there's a link to do so in the video, multiple links to do so in the video description. And a big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair for helping support the channel. Thank you, patrons. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you all next week.